For today, we're focusing on what I think we can all agree on is a very widespread and increasing problem, and that is loneliness amongst young people. It's something very close to me, moving from Cardiff to London, going to university in COVID. But rather than me speaking, we've got three fantastic youth loneliness speakers doing brilliant work in the youth loneliness space. And they're going to be sharing their work and experiences and perspectives. I know I'll sure be learning a lot from them, and I'm sure you will too. So first, we're having Sophie, who's the campaign manager from the Co-op Foundation and manages their youth-led behaviour change campaign, Lonely Not Alone. Next, we'll be hearing from Hamza, who is head of the youth work at Here for Youth, a charity with a mission to make youth work effective and simple. And last but not least, we're having Molly Taylor, who is a dedicated youth activist who wears just many multiple hats as an ambassador, consultant, and a founder of Alone No More. And throughout the session, before we start, just feel free to put any questions, any thoughts and any ideas as we go along. And then also you can keep those questions and put your hands up after the speakers have finished speaking. So first and foremost, we have Sophie, who is going to give a presentation on the Co-op Foundation's initiative, Lonely Not Alone, and all the specific learnings that they found. So over to you, Sophie.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen, which hopefully people will be able to see shortly. First thing I will say, can everybody see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Lovely. Thank you. So I'm Sophie Beresford. I am the campaign manager at the Co-op Foundation. For anybody that doesn't know who the Co-op Foundation are, we are the Co-op charity. So the Co-op business you all might be familiar with, the shop at the end of the road, we are their charity. And we launched a campaign to tackle the stigma of youth loneliness, Alone Not Alone. This is the last year that we're going to be promoting the campaign. So we're doing all we can to share our learning to create a lasting legacy for the campaign. So this has come at a very good time. So I'm going to try and condense a lot into a very short space of time. So do forgive me if I miss out bits. So we have been tackling youth loneliness since 2017. We sort of entered this space as a result of some research that the Co-op business did with the British Red Cross, which found that young people were lonely more than any other age group. As a result, we launched our Belong programme, which helped to tackle this in 3 ways. And you might be familiar with some of these pieces of really important work. So first of all, we funded projects. These were UK-wide funded projects, and they were designed to connect and empower young people to tackle loneliness. For the England-specific projects, they were often in partnership or co-funded with DCMS and the I Will Fund. And in total, through this work, we awarded a total of £7 million. We then went on to strengthen the youth sector, and the way that we did this was we commissioned a piece of research. We commissioned UK Youth to carry out the research, and it helped us to understand what support youth workers and colleagues needed. This was then created into a Place to Belong report, which some of you might already be familiar with, and led to the creation of the Belong Collective, which is still led by UK Youth, and the National Youth Partnership, which is led by Youth Focused North East. And then the final one you'll see here is tackling the stigma, which is where Lonely Not Alone comes in. So, as I say, Lonely Not Alone is a Co-op Foundation campaign. It was also delivered in partnership with a specialist creative agency called Effervescent, who have sadly closed as of summer this year. But what is important to say is that from day one, it was youth-led. So it was a campaign made by young people for young people to tackle the stigma of youth loneliness. And the reason that we decided to launch that campaign is because we wanted to show everyone that we wanted to show young people that everybody cared about youth loneliness. So not just young people, but adults as well. As you can see here, from the first year that we launched, our research showed that only 26% of young people felt confident talking about loneliness, while only 43% thought it was a normal emotion for their age group. And through the campaign, we wanted to change that, and we wanted to put young people in the lead. And the reason that we wanted to do that is because we found that if young people are enabled to talk confidently about loneliness, they're less likely to open up about what they're going through, which would lead to a negative impact on their mental well-being. So we wanted to obviously put the campaign in place to prevent that from happening. I'm going to very briefly go through this, and I'm also not going to play the videos because one, technology, we don't need to be dealing with that, and also it's quite small, so it's not particularly accessible. So you can go on YouTube and look at these in full, and I'd encourage you to do that because they're very impactful. But in the first year, so when we started in 2019, as you can see here, we started with animations. The young co-designers that we had that year, they came up with the name of the campaign and this idea to wear yellow socks. And the yellow socks idea came from the fact that young people said that when they felt lonely, they'd look at the floor. And obviously, when you look at the floor, you can see socks. So that's why we chose the colour yellow, guided by them. And that's how the yellow socks activation came to life. We then carried that on throughout 2020, where understandably because of the pandemic, there was an increase in people reporting feelings of loneliness. And then in 2021, guided by our theory of change, we decided to launch the digital universe, which for anybody that has no idea what the digital universe is, I would encourage you to go on the website. It is what it says on the tin. It's where young people can share their stories of experiencing loneliness, and there are different constellations, and those different constellations reflect different reasons why young people are lonely. So when you submit a story, your story then goes into a constellation that either you choose or you leave the moderators to choose where your story might fit. And the idea is that you can then explore other stories and find your tribe, so people that are lonely for similar reasons to you, perhaps. And then finally, we expanded the universe in 2022 and added another activation for those who maybe didn't have a story to share, or for people that wanted to show their support. We also found that through our research, which I will slightly touch on shortly, there was a real issue around young people feeling that society took youth loneliness seriously. So we introduced this opportunity for people to share a message of support, so people from all ages could leave a message to encourage people to show young people that they might be lonely, but they're not alone. So that's a sort of snapshot through the years, if you like. I'm just going to share this video. I don't know if the audio is going to work, and it's fine if it doesn't, because it's obviously got a lot of written text on anyway. But this is just a very short video to give you a summary of our key achievements over the last 5 years, thanks to young people. So there you go, a little snapshot for you of what we've achieved. I just wanted to kind of focus in on this, the outcomes from the campaign, because I appreciate that was about 10 seconds, I think, on that slide. But you can see here that we've had an increase from when we started the campaign and did that first initial research back in 2019 to where our last research that we did, which was November, towards the end of November last year. You'll see that they have all increased, apart from the Agreeing Society cares about or takes loneliness seriously. That has kind of gone up and down over the years, to be honest, but if we're comparing the two, they have seemingly stayed the same. And there's quite a few reasons for that. I think one of the perhaps more obvious ones is the fact that there is a lot going on in the world, and a lot of the content that we consume, so how it affects social media algorithms, how it affects the news, all that sort of stuff. Last November, obviously, there was a lot on social media through any content that we sort of consume, where it was focused on the cost of living, but not really a conversation necessarily around the impact that the cost of living was having on loneliness. So could be just kind of typical when you do research during a particular period of time, that is why we ended up with the result that we did for that. So yeah, just a bit of context around that. But in general, obviously they've increased, which is, we're happy to say we've contributed to that. So in terms of what we did helps tackle the stigma of youth loneliness, I've tried to condense it down as much as I can into these bullet points. So first things first, and that's why I put it first, because I feel like it's one of the most important points, is being youth-led was really important for our campaign. So it's putting those with lived experience, which is obviously young people, at the heart of tackling an issue that affects them. So we involved them in the creative development, and they had creative control over what the campaign looked like, what it felt like. They were involved in all of the meetings when it came to what the digital universe looked like, what would happen if we updated it, all aspects of the creative element of the campaign they were involved in. And that helped us to create a truly authentic campaign that not only resonated with young people, but also encouraged them to take action, which is obviously what you want from a campaign. You want there to be an impact. We also involved them in promoting the campaign. So as opposed to it being, myself or our CEO taking those opportunities, we actually wanted to encourage the young people to share their stories and amplify their voices, because it was their story and their campaign. We saw ourselves as simply providing the resources to bring it to life, but really it was their campaign and we wanted them to take sort of ownership of it. So we would involve them in and pay them to run the social media page. We would involve them in writing blogs, doing media and PR opportunities and interviews, and also, as you saw from the key achievement slide, involving them in political events that we were offered as well. Having a theory of change really was helpful for us, because it helped us to develop what we were going to do every single year, and it gave us both a direction of travel over the last 5 years, and also helped to guide our decision making. So what we would focus on that year and how we would progress it and move it forward from what we did last year, rather than doing the same thing sort of every year. One thing that we would say, which I suppose I sort of touched on right at the beginning, is that it's difficult to encourage national behaviour change through a campaign alone. And I think it was really helpful for us that we had the Plong programme and the funding that we were providing through that, and obviously the partnerships that we were able to harness through that relationship. We were able to use that to then obviously amplify the campaign as well. They both complemented each other really well to ultimately tackle the stigma of youth loneliness. Regular research was really important for us to be able to demonstrate our impact and our return on investment, for want of a better term. And it also informed our annual campaign strategies. So we would look at that. So one example of this would be in 2021, we looked at the research from the end of that year, and we looked at the areas where there might be higher instances of loneliness, and we would then use marketing and PR tactics to target those areas. We would also look at different demographics. So we saw that there was a significant increase in the number of people in rural areas really struggling with loneliness. So we would target those specific areas, and we would also target students, because we found that increased quite significantly as well. So that's how it sort of influenced our work every single year. There are different levels of research. I can share more about that. And I touched on it in a webinar we did recently, which I'm going to share with you shortly if you wanted to learn a little bit more about that. This feels like an obvious one, but I think it's still important to involve obvious points. But partnerships have been absolutely essential for us in amplifying the campaign. We wouldn't have been able to reach as many young people as we were able to without the partnerships that we have, and the people that were helping us, primarily the sort of youth sector, but also youth charities, etc., who helped us to reach young people, especially those who might be lonely. And finally, engaging MPs was really important, especially those that had an interest in loneliness, had personal experiences of loneliness, and could help us to influence systemic change and also drive that national conversation around loneliness as well. But I thought it was also really important to share. I've been through the Lone Not Alone universe, which is quite a task because there's over 300 stories now on there. And I've pulled out some key themes from what young people have said helped them to tackle loneliness in themselves. So I've grouped these as well as I can. So first of all, speaking, which I know can take a lot of courage. You've got to build a lot of courage to be able to do that. But a lot of people did talk about the importance of having opportunities to talk to adults primarily. So family, friends, teachers, youth workers, mentors, they found that really valuable, and having that time to be able to do that, not in front of others, was really something that was mentioned quite a few times across a number of different constellations. Putting yourself out there was also talked about, so both in a sort of physical sense but also in a virtual sense. So what I mean by that is people saying that maybe they just started at university and they wanted to make friends with people, so they would ask people to go to coffee or go to an event that they might be interested in because they're doing a similar course. That seemed to really help people. But also there is this online support as well, so joining support groups, whether that be in person or virtually, and also joining social media community groups. So this was particularly popular amongst those who are living with a chronic illness. Were saying that they were searching for maybe people talking about the topics, or influencers or advocates who are talking about their experience of chronic illness. But also there are some Facebook groups that exist as well in those areas. But that's just one example. There are obviously many different community groups that exist online. Getting therapy, support from youth charities, and then also university mental wellbeing services were the main sort of professional approaches that were mentioned. Childline was mentioned a few times as well as one of the youth charities that has really helped young people, which was good to see that was having an impact. Getting involved in activities that people enjoy. Sometimes it was finding out, actually having the courage to join those activities, and also being able to find them. That seemed to be the big struggle, is people finding them in the first instance and then having the confidence to do that. And there was also a lot of expression around how creative work was giving them an outlet to express their loneliness as well. One of the things that I think is perhaps potentially discussed the most when I'm working through stories and I'm moderating them is this idea that people's experience of loneliness is reduced significantly when they find other people who are the same as them and understand what they are going through. And there are two groups specifically that this seems to be relevant for, according to the stories that we have on the universe. So it is people who are neurodivergent, and also those from the LGBTQIA plus community. These stories are often found in our unicorn constellation, and if you take a look yourself, you'll see that there's a lot of people saying that as soon as they found people that understood what they were going through, it really helped to relieve the feelings of loneliness that they were experiencing. And then finally, so more recently, really, we've had a lot of stories around reframing what loneliness feels like, and how often loneliness is shown as something that's incredibly negative. But actually there can be moments where perhaps there's a bit of work to be doing around how loneliness can sometimes, for some people, be quite a positive thing, because it provides a moment for appreciation and reflection. So that's something that seems to be coming through a little bit more recently. But hopefully that gives you a bit of a snapshot of what young people are saying on our universe, which you can look yourself. As I say, it's a page that is accessible for everybody. I can probably share this round after, because these are all links, but as I said before, we hosted a webinar probably I'd say it's about 3 weeks ago. It might even be longer than that now. All the weeks seem to sort of blur into one, but we hosted a webinar to share everything that we'd learned over the last 5 years. We crammed a lot into an hour and 15 minutes. If you'd like to watch that back, it is available on YouTube, but I can send this link around as well. There's a link via our website. We also created a short PDF summary, which is basically our key achievements followed by our recommendations for different areas of the sector. And then also Eloise, who is the creative director, was the creative director for Effervescent, who are the creative agency I mentioned earlier. she did a lot of work around how to help people actually unearth that lived experience and how to effectively co-design content with young people. So I really, if that's an area you're particularly interested in, that's why I've included her website, because even though she doesn't run the company anymore, she's still continuing to do that work and is very open to having those conversations and sharing learning. So I can probably send that round after, as I say. And then the final thing to say is, as I mentioned at the start, we are going to stop promoting Lonely Not Alone at the end of 2023. For those who follow the Cult Foundation on LinkedIn or any sort of form of social media, you'll see we launched a new strategy this week actually. So we'll be doing that from next year forwards. It kind of captures what we're going to be doing over the next 2 years. So you can find out a little bit more about our reasonings, which I won't go into now because conscious of time. But what we're trying to do before the website becomes a static resource, and what we mean by that is that people won't be able to upload a story or leave a message of support after the end of this year, but the site will remain live so people can read stories. What we're trying to do is get as many messages of support and stories on the universe before people are unable to do it. So that's why I put the QR code. If you would like something you'd like to do today, if you've got a message you'd like to share with a lonely young person, if it's something you've experienced before, then I would highly encourage you to do so before that's not possible. So that is me. I will close this down so I can actually see everybody.
Thank you so much, Sophie, and thank you for being that kind of long view as well, and all the different work you do and bringing it all together. And I'll definitely go check out Lonely Not Alone, which is fantastic. But just for, I know people might have some burning questions, but just for timing issues, I think it would be great if we move on to Hamza now, who is going to tell us a little bit more about his work at Here for Youth and all the current challenges and the crucial role of communities in combating loneliness. Thank you so much, Sophie. And over to you, Hamza.
How is everyone doing? My name is Hamza. Before I go into my current role, I just give a bit of background into my story to youth work. At the age of 15, I was finally kicked out of school again, and now like not having any school to go to. And I won't go into a incident right now, but at that point, I decided to sort of change my life around. At the age of 16, which was maybe 14 years ago, there was a moment in my life where a friend was like stabbed in his heart. Another friend was on life support machine. Another friend got a 9-year prison sentence. Another friend got a 7-year prison sentence. And I was watching a prison documentary and I saw another one of my friends on this documentary. And I remember at that moment, I just had this moment where I knew all of these people personally. I knew their really good character traits. Like my friend that got stabbed in the heart, I remember once we were playing football and he kicked the ball into someone's window and he went and knocked on the door. And he said, an auntie came and opened the door and he was like, look, what would young people normally do? They'd run away, right? If they kicked the ball into someone's window and it broke. He went, he knocked, he said, how much does it cost? I'll get it sorted out. He was only like 15 at the time. And then the auntie said, don't worry about it, son. It's fine. He comes back the next day and gives her money. Like he insisted. And this is a similar story for most of these friends. And then I started doing youth work in my house. I had maybe like, at one point we had 80 young people come and my mum was like, it cannot carry on here anymore. At the same time, obviously austerity was like starting, youth clubs were closing down. And I lived 3 doors away from the local mosque. We moved the youth stuff there. And then we launched a project where we were working with mosques basically. And we've worked in 250 mosques. Up until like 3 years ago, we would do direct delivery of the youth work, both mainly for teenage boys and teenage girls, or young men and young women. And it came to a point where at every mosque where our team are running the event, we'd hear about incidences of like and I'm sure everyone here is aware of it. We all work in the sector of like a young person, we drop a young person home, and he's really smiling. I remember once, and his mum comes out and she's like, she starts crying and she's like, I can't remember the last time I saw him smile. He was severely autistic. And we obviously knew that prior to him coming to the event, and we were able to like make sure we can cater for him properly. And she said that just 2 weeks ago, because he had left school because he was being bullied, and he had left several schools, he had like attempted suicide. We were really happy that, wow, he enjoyed this event, but we also knew that he needs a regular space. He needs a space that is, we know the cliche saying, it takes a village to raise a child. I would say in today's day and age, it takes a community to raise a child. Also, as a young person myself growing up, what I understand to be the carceral system now, I was never a fan of mainstream youth work, probably because of like generational Islamophobia, structural racism, etc. I never felt like safe to speak to people myself growing up. One of the things that I'm not a big fan of actually is the term youth work. What we prefer to say in Here for Youth in all of our training that we do now for mosques is effective youth engagement. We feel that anyone who's around teenagers, which is more or less everyone, if you have a neighbor, if you have children, if you have nephews, nieces, friends, families, etc., then you should be good at engaging teenagers, and it's a skill that everyone should have. We believe it should be simple, and even on. So most of my work that I've done in like the mainstream sector would be in the London Borough of Hackney, and like there's a 16+ network there, and there's all these organisations there. But what I've even found with them is that like the guys that do like the young mental health related work, they struggle to have that grassroots relationship with young people, and there's not enough organisations for them to pair up and team with. Secondly, I feel like we don't if we're an organisation that has a niche, we still have space, and especially when we look at sustainability and how we use that space, there are definitely people in the community that would happily volunteer their time if we made the space for them, that would easily attract young people. And I think what was mentioned in the slides, as long as you advertise things that young people like and you try different things and you see what works, and you will get your regular young people. What we have now is a framework that focuses on engagement, effectiveness, marketing, impact measurement, documentation, safeguarding, team structure. We have an entire framework. I think 97% of the people that have been through our training are volunteers. There are 33 hubs up and down the country that currently follow this framework. On average, each hub would have between 20 and 30 teenagers that they work with on a weekly basis. I think it's not possible to speak about youth loneliness without speaking about PTSD. And a lot of our work is within the Muslim community. 39% of Muslims are brought up in the most deprived areas. 40% of Muslims are young people, mainly in the major cities. We know through research that PTSD lasts between 4 and 7 generations. This is the biggest thing that I find in my day-to-day work. I feel like, and really the work that we do is to create that space of safety where shame is lifted, and people can speak about what they're going through. I feel like a good community has difficult conversations. So it's a place for them to come, be themselves, speak. And look, if someone's been sexually violated, right, and because of that, they're now isolated, they're not the one that should hold the shame for it, and they need a space to speak and to let go of that shame. And that's really the crux of the work that we do. Two other things that I just really want to touch on before I conclude. As you can see with the current situation happening in Palestine, I think Islamophobia is really real. it's been happening pre 9/11. People have been dehumanized for a very long time. I remember when 9/11 happened, coming back home and my mum telling me that she got spat on her way home. My mum is someone that is married to someone with a bad gambling addiction that has 4 kids, that did everything for us, that would do anything for anyone. And I remember seeing that as a young person. But when you look at mainstream rhetoric, you can see why that happens. I feel like even if you look in the academic space, like in anthropology and things like that, a lot of things that come into the mainstream, like resources and culture, historically is from the lens of a white man, right? And I think organizations can do more to listen to the Muslim voice, to work with Muslim-led organizations. One, in funding, but two, funding that doesn't come with policing as well. And these are some of the things that I think would really work. And I would urge everyone here that if you do work on a community level, reach out to your local mosque. You will definitely find supporters in your work as long as they have the capacity for it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Hamza.
You're
And thank you for telling your story as well. I don't know if anyone's got any questions. I think Tash. Oh no, that's just the clapping hands.
We've got one question in the chat from Kirsty
Oh, I missed that. And we've got a hand up
and also Mohammed.
and also Mark as well. So why don't we go with Mohammed if you want to ask a question? And I'll
Yeah,
see
it
to
wasn't.
you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for that, Hamza. It wasn't a question; it's more like a comment. So yeah, we are Become United, and we work for ethnic communities across Greater Manchester. And I just wanted to add a point in terms of working with people of color. I think the main issue we have with isolation is within the community, because there's a sense of community. The community doesn't see this as an issue. They'll be like, this isolation shouldn't exist because we have your family, you have your friends, you have the community, you have the mosque. So I think that was just a point I just wanted to add. So I think that it's very vital that isolation is spoken about within ethnic communities more so, because it's the acknowledgement of the issue isn't there.
I think 300,000 people, young people in England and Wales. I'll put some links up. I just put on the comment section after. Have been diagnosed with PTSD as well, and 70% of that is like not attended to, and that's only what's diagnosed. The reason why I speak about PTSD a lot as well is because whether you look at any ethnic minority, because of like Western hegemony and colonialism, a lot of people here do have generational trauma that really needs to be addressed. We're ultimately a group of traumatized people working with traumatized people, just trying to break the cycle. And I think it's really felt, with a lot of the young people that we see.
I think there's just one question as well from Kirsty, who's put in the chat.
Hi.
So, do you want to speak?
Yeah, well, someone's unmuted me, so I thought I may as well. Hiya. Yeah, Hamza, I just wanted to ask, did the atmosphere change when people move from being in like a house situation to being in sort of a more formal kind of mosque situation? Because I think sometimes the building that people are in can have a difference, can't it? So I just wondered if you'd noticed, a lot of change there.
There's two things. So the mosque is different to the church in the sense of like, so when people go into a mosque, they take their shoes off. It's just carpet everywhere, and you can just like sit down. You can play football. You can like do different things within the space itself. So my view is that every space should be a safe space. One of the things that we find with mosques is that people identify with faith, like I'm sure you guys spoke about in the first week. So sometimes if someone's safe space becomes a gang, right? Which, can it be a safe space? I don't think so. But if that becomes their safe space and their idea of it, they do sometimes need a space that's quite different, that they also respect, and they want to be there as well. And that can be quite helpful because you have a culture. If I could share my screen, there is something that I wanted to share. So on our framework, there's 4 things we mainly go through. One is just for people to be authentically themselves. When I've spoken to people that work in churches, it's like you have your church mode, then you have your youth worker mode, and you have your at-home mode, right? And I think I've seen this with a lot of youth workers, but just to be yourself, it's really important to be yourself. In some of the people I've trained, English isn't the first language. Some of them that could only speak like 20 words of English. They've ended up volunteering for the local youth hub. Within 2 to 3 months of just being themselves, the young people absolutely love them, right? The second thing is about thought-provoking discussions, but the culture we build around it, which I think is quite important to have within the space. The third thing, which I also want to really touch on, I think that's really important, is backing young people to grow. And the way we define this, and I won't go into it too much more, is your job is to actually make a space for them to get it wrong. It's not actually the biggest mistake that I find people do is about helping young people to do the right thing. No, having young people in a place of empowerment is the right thing. It's not about them doing it right or wrong. If we truly want to be youth-led, we need to give them positions. We need to have them involved in key decision making, but where resources are given. And we obviously guide them in that, because the youth are not the future. They are the present, and their children are the future, but they are the future leaders. If we can make spaces for them to get it wrong, we can have their back, we can help them develop. Then when they get older, they can do much better work than us as well.
Thank you, Hamza. And there's one more question as Fran that we got time for.
Unmute myself. Just a quick one, Hamza. You mentioned the Israel and Palestine situation, and I think we're seeing a lot of young people engaged in the issue, especially from kind of racialized backgrounds, or and you mentioned this generational trauma, and how kind of the Palestinian struggle is kind of everyone's struggle that has, you know, experienced oppression and kind of come from countries that have been colonized. What are the kind of the things that you're seeing amongst the young people that you work with? Are you, what are people saying at the moment?
I had a call with a mother yesterday saying that her daughter cannot sleep because she has nightmares in her sleep. I had another call from another parent that their daughter is scared to go outside because of the young child that was murdered in America. There's 2 things. The first point I want to make is being like apolitical isn't an option. Like, young people need a space. Like, I remember I was at a gathering with some people from the church, and I was like, we're not getting much people young people to our events, but when the BLM protest happened, there were like and they were in like a small village, there were 200-300 people that showed up. These spaces, one, should be a space to have current issue conversation. We should have them. One, even yesterday, I had a conversation with a young person. He said to me, what I'm about to say might be anti-Semitic, but because I'm having the conversation with him, I'm in a position to address, like, even on that, to address his thoughts and his views and challenge him on it, so he can like change his opinions and his thoughts and his views, right? So we need to have these conversations. And even if you look at like the algorithm, right, when people do videos on political issues, they get millions of views. Like, I was looking at I was like comparing views to like hip hop artists and people like that compared to stuff on the Israel-Palestine conflict at the moment. And a lot more people are watching that. So young people are interested in this. 1. 2, when it comes to the shared trauma and the shared struggle, the thing that I find that's really problematic is the government and mainstream narrative. People are scared in one way to attend demonstrations and stuff like that. But people need to attend demonstrations for their own healing. people need to write, people need to speak for their own healing, and one, to make a difference, but also for their own healing. So one thing that I've advised a lot of people to do is actually, if put a message out there to young people that if you want to discuss it, if you have thoughts or anything on it and you want to discuss it, you're welcome to discuss it at this space, create a time for it. Two, the demonstration on Saturday, maybe get the young people to come in 1 or 2 hours early into the youth space and get them to write their letters, to the civilians that are being that are losing their homes, that are losing their family members, that are losing everything. They can write letters to them. Sometimes we know in healing from trauma, let's say someone was sexually abused by a father who's passed away. The way that someone might overcome that is by writing a letter to them or recording a video and speaking to the camera, right? That's one way of overcoming it. So come in, write on a banner your message to the people that are like causing war crimes, write your message to them, right? And then join thousands of people that are also going through that suffering and power at the same time. So I think being involved in obviously things that are within the law and things that are non-violent action is really important. I think that's the main thing that helps young people. And young people want to see a change, and it's important that they feel like they can be a part of that. And we look at things that are happening. Even on climate change, we just saw recently, whether or not you agree with Just Stop Oil and their ways, but their cause is right. And they've even been dehumanized on mainstream media. And I'm sure if we had a conversation about that within our youth groups, a lot of young people would have a lot to say. Like people's anxiety about climate change is real. Like people are really worried about it. Young people would have a space to say. So we need to not shy away from social action, is what I would say. And we need to be brave, and sometimes we might come under fire for it. But the more braver we are, then it helps the young people.
Oh, well, honestly, Hamza, thank you so much. I know we're getting loads of comments in the chat, and your perspective is fantastic. And I know we're running tight on time, as we always do with these. So I'd love to just really bring us swiftly on to our final speaker, which is Molly Taylor, who's a prominent youth loneliness activist, consultant of governmental, non-governmental organisations. And I personally was really inspired by Molly's stories online, and she's going to tell you a bit more about that. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hamza, and over to you, Molly.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Sophie and Hamza, for your really insightful discussions about loneliness from different perspectives. I am an activist in youth loneliness and have been for the past 2 years. I've contributed my lived experience in Parliament at all party parliamentary groups and roundtables on loneliness. So really governmental as well as non-governmental organisations, and I've got quite a good relationship with Stuart Andrew, who's a Minister for Loneliness, because of that work that I've done, and I've also helped UK Youth conduct some research which was linking back to what Sophie was talking about. And in summer, more recently, I founded an initiative called Alone No More, which I'll talk about in a minute. And it's basically acts as a resource hub for young people and organisations that either experience loneliness or want to help young people tackle loneliness. So I just wanted to kind of touch on my own lived experience because I think it paints a picture. And I have felt lonely, probably like chronically lonely, for the past like 2 years. And currently I'm not the only one. There are over 2 million young people that feel similar to how I feel. And just recently a new report came out by Student Minds that says that 93% of young people who are students have also felt lonely at some point. So as we can see, it is a very current issue, and it's something that is urgently needs to be addressed because it does link to other mental health crises, etc. But like I said, my story is just one of that, and kind of I want to underscore that that is something that's really vital, that message, because young people's mental health is so intricate and so complex, but therefore it does require a variety of solutions and kind of a tailored approach to every young person, because we all deserve a good mental health and not a poor one. For me, I am really passionate about making sure that every young person, you know, deserves and needs someone that they can trust who actually listens to them. I didn't have that personally growing up. It took me 21 years before someone finally listened to me, and without judging me or without jumping to conclusions. So I'm just going to go into a little bit more about my story, which it also might be quite triggering to some. So please, if you're not feeling comfortable, please remove yourself from the call if you'd like. So growing up, I was labelled as a superstar at school. I used to get those fancy gold stickers on my workbooks. I had good grades. I never missed a day. But the truth is, I wanted the teachers to notice why I was staying late after school, why I was doing extracurricular activities, why I was volunteering my time so much past 3 p.m. But instead, they just thought that I was really hardworking and they didn't really question it. But behind that young, bright smile, there was a lot of pain at home. Things were very tough. I was a survivor of domestic abuse and still am. And that's why I stayed in school, because it's the only place that I felt safe and only the service I thought that was closest to me. I didn't know about youth hubs. I didn't know about youth workers at that time. The only people I thought that were my safe space were teachers, but even then they weren't able to, they didn't have the capacity to look after me and my needs. And then fast forward, so I kind of experienced this throughout the 18 years of education. And then about 2.5 years ago, everything changed. I become essentially estranged from all of my family after a police investigation. And months later, I found myself starting university, but again with that brave face. And again, I was labelled, as soon as I entered the education system, I was labelled as a mature student because I was just 21 years old, not the typical age for a university student. But then again, this put me into another category and another assumption rather than asking who I was. And, you know, they didn't know half of it. The education system didn't ask about my needs or, you know, what had happened to Molly in the past. And that's when I think I started to feel really, really lonely. It was winter of 2021, so coming up to 2 years, and things got really tough. I would sleep a lot, like I'm talking like 14 hours a day, just to try and fill up that empty feeling and void. I would eat alone. I talked to no one on days on end, despite being in student accommodation, despite being around people in my lectures. And it got so bad that I would then start thinking about whether my life was actually worth it. And of course, no young person deserves to have that question on their mind. I did try mental health helplines, but there were wait times for over 4 hours every single night. That meant that I didn't wait and I just ended up hanging up. And then one day, there was a kind of this pivotal moment in my life where, as I always am, kind of proactive young person, because I felt like I always need to fill up a void. I was just scrolling on a website looking for more opportunities for myself to get involved in, because I was just desperate, in need for help. And I came across the Belong Collective Leadership Group by UK Youth, which is something that Sophie spoke about and something that the CARP Foundation have worked with and funded. And it was just random. I didn't know that this even existed, but apparently, no, but not apparently, but it was an ad for a chance to be a young leader for a loneliness leadership group in the country. And until then, I didn't really understand what loneliness was. I never even heard of the concepts. My peers never spoke about it. I just thought I was grappling with PTSD and depression, which I'd been diagnosed with 5 years prior. So that's why when I went to GP and stuff, they never really thought of it as being loneliness. So then I started to look more into loneliness. I looked at the Red Cross website, which is a great resource for loneliness and defining what it is. And I realized that is exactly what I was going through. So I applied to that leadership group, and I got onto it, which is amazing. But obviously, again, there was only myself and about 500 young people that were on it, which out of the whole of the UK that are suffering from loneliness, that was a very small amount of young people. But I was just very grateful that I was chosen. And that decision honestly changed my life. At 21 years old, that was the first time that I'd ever found another group of young people who knew what loneliness felt like. I think it comes to the point of resonance, like Sophie was talking about the lonely universe. A lot of young people talk about just resonance amongst your peers is something that really helps with loneliness. And it was the first time that I ever experienced open access youth work. And again, I didn't know what youth work was until the age of 21. And it was the first time that I felt like I was being truly listened to. It wasn't the mental health helplines or the GP that saved me. It was a youth worker. And when I shared my story with them, when they asked me, what makes Molly Molly for the first time in 21 years, they checked on me. Even after their work hours, they would ring me up on their personal numbers to ask if I'm okay, if they're worried about me, and they just wanted to talk and hear to what I was struggling with. But I just think this just serves as a reminder of my story kind of reminds us that things aren't always what they seem, and that's why I'm now on a mission to make sure that every young person has access to youth work or a youth worker, even if they don't need it, across the UK, because without that, I don't know where I'll be right now. So having experienced how crucial youth work can be, I am now, right now, there is only 4 million out of 14 million young people which have the opportunity to access youth work, and that needs to change. And I think we have to recognise the essential support that youth workers provide to our young people. If you work with young people, I just want you to remember my story and take a moment that if you're seeing a young person later this afternoon or perhaps later this week at one of your youth hubs or whoever you're working with, just sit them down for 2 to 5 minutes. It honestly doesn't have to be much, and just ask them, what makes them them and how are they, and just give them divided attention for a few minutes, and it will honestly change their life. And you just never know if someone is feeling lonely, and that might be the one time that out of the whole week that they've spoken to someone about loneliness, or maybe the first time like it was with me, and your conversation will honestly make such a difference. So now, because of the leadership opportunity, I've now been able to tackle loneliness myself. So I've gone from a service user, I'm still accessing youth work, but it's now giving me the confidence and leadership skills, like Sophie was saying, now to be able to tackle loneliness myself. So as of summer, I just came up with an initiative called Alone No More, and the idea behind it was whenever I was trying to access services for loneliness, a lot of it would be organizational based. It would be like, how can a youth worker tackle loneliness, how can a bigger organization support loneliness, etc. But there was never anything for young people specifically, never any resources. And actually Lonely Universe is only the very few resources I've ever seen come up. So I a year ago, when I was in my room feeling quite lonely, I decided to design some postcards, and they're called loneliness postcards, and they have prompts on the front, and then you turn them over and it's like a postcard. You can keep it in your room. You can some youth hubs that I work with now, they have like a little box that you can post it through, and it serves as a journal for young people feeling lonely. And right now, I'm very proud to say that we're accessing and supporting over 7,000 young people since August through partnerships, which are completely free. What happens is the organisations I work with, I send them the PDF of the loneliness postcards. They distribute it to their young people on my behalf, and then I get feedback from them to make sure that they're being useful and they are as best as they can be, and I get sent photos and stuff, which is amazing. So yeah, and just to finish off, my 2 calls to action for this conversation for you to leave with is, again, just starting conversations and listening. Listening doesn't require funding, and as we know in the youth sector, funding is one of the big barriers that we face together. And whilst there has been some funding recently into loneliness sector and the youth sector, obviously we know there's been massive cuts, but again, listening is free if you have the capacity to do so, that is. And secondly, I just want to I'm really calling government next year to recognise youth workers as frontline workers that are just as useful as teachers, as NHS. They really do some really core work like Hamza's doing on the ground. So thank you so much for listening.
No, thank you, Molly. And I was going to ask you for your call for action, but you beat me to it. And thank you for telling your reality and your story. And I know how far your story has gone, and then because I've definitely read it myself. So thank you so much. And I know, unfortunately, we have gone past time, because I could carry on speaking to you for absolutely ages. And I just want to thank our speakers today, honestly, for being so open, being so just gracious with everything you said, and your different perspectives as well. And I really hope that everyone's taken away something from today. So thank you.